this is a picture taken by one of the Opportunity rovers on the surface of Mars. And the tracks made in the surface there were made by a rover, an Opportunity rover, as it passed by. And as it passed by, some liquid filled in the tracks and froze, and it's as you see it there. This happened several years ago, and there are many pictures like this, including pictures of the rovers with muddy wheels and so on. You wondered why NASA waited until just a couple of weeks ago to announce the discovery of water on Mars, when the water had been discovered on Mars probably a dozen or more times previously, dating all the way back to the early 80s. And was officially announced by the European Space Agency 3 years ago. But NASA didn't recognize any of those discoveries and kept arguing, well, it could be carbon dioxide ice, there's no evidence that it's water. And interestingly enough, there is no experiment on either Spirit or Opportunity which could detect water directly. They're only to detect minerals that could have been modified by water billions of years ago. Reason for that is simple: jobs and money. The approved missions in the space program held off the discovery of water on Mars, according to advanced planning, until the Phoenix mission that just landed a few weeks ago, last month. So if it had been recognized any sooner, the main point of that mission would have been undercut. Likewise, with many of the other findings, both the U.S. spacecraft in 1976 and more recently the European spacecraft have found strong evidence of microorganisms, living microorganisms, in the soil of Mars today. But they don't dare announce that or recognize it either right now, because then the justification for the next 6 missions would be undercut, and it would be back to the drawing board. So NASA approval, a stamp of approval, will be slow in coming according to the schedule that's been doled out. Remember, I know there's a lot of talk in these conferences about conspiracies. You could call it a conspiracy if you wanted to, but really it boils down to money and jobs. They're humans like everybody else, and you put a lifetime of work in on building an instrument for a spacecraft and then find that the mission is canceled because somebody beat you to the discovery, it's a devastating thing. So this is the way the space program as it's presently organized works. Here's an example of a couple of fossils seen by the Opportunity spacecraft. We won't have same kind of comment, but not officially recognized yet as anything. When we look at the surface of Mars from orbit, we see all kinds of interesting things, and about 1 in every 1,000 photographs returned to Earth has shown something of such high interest that if we didn't know, that if it wasn't published on a NASA website and we didn't know it came from Mars, we would be pretty sure that the pictures had been taken on Earth. And I'll show you some examples of why in a moment. This is a low-resolution photograph of an area with a couple of large craters, as you see. And this white box that's drawn in here on top of the photograph, that's a region where the spacecraft took a very high-resolution view, so we could see close up what was there. And what they were interested in seeing was, what's this dark stain on the floor of the crater? And so when we switch to the high-resolution view, we'll see that it starts here. The spacecraft flies over empty desert sand. Then it comes to the edge of the crater, and we see the shadow on the wall of the edge of the crater. We see a bit of the normal floor of the crater, and then we come to the dark stain. So let's follow the spacecraft. Okay, there's an overview of the strip image it took, and now let's look at that magnified. It starts out over the desert, flat and smooth, not too much of interest. Then we come up to the edge of the crater. We see the shadow on the wall at the edge. We see a flat, smooth floor, and then we see the dark stain. We don't know what this is, but it does change with the seasons and with the and even with the time of the day, as the sunlight changes its direction and so on. So it's one of many, many things that we'd like to know more about, but probably won't know officially for many years. This also is something on Mars. I'm tempted to say growing, but we don't know that. This is an area, the coloration is added here on Earth, but we see these large objects with a branch-like structure around a central trunk area. This is a couple hundred meters across in the very low gravity field of Mars. There are many such pictures, and again, they do change with the seasons. And as the picture suggests, the European spacecraft, which does have colors, shows that they green up in the summer. That was one of Arthur C. Clarke's, the late science fiction authors, one of his favorites. He said he thought we'd been short-sighted and that it was 95% certain that Mars is more hospitable to life than previously thought. This is another kind of anomaly that we're seeing on the red planet called glassy tubes. Here's an overview picture of what was seen in high resolution. There seem to be 3 of these tubes coming together here, and this is a a clip, a magnified view of just this one tube, showing that what is characteristic of all of them, they seem to have a translucent tube material surrounded by these white bands that wrap around and around. And you can see through, in good high-resolution views, you can see that the bands do wrap, and you can see them faintly through the translucent tube. You also see this white spot here, which apparently is a specular reflection of sunlight, indicating a very shiny or possibly metallic surface, but a high-gloss surface, unlike the diffuse or scattered kind of reflection you get off normal material. Here, this shows the very glassy character of these tubes. This one shows the famous region on Mars called Sidonia, where we have the so-called face on Mars. I'll have a few remarks about that later. There's also a little feature over here called the fort. These are just names given to things. We don't know for sure what they are. But out of the back, or the, shall we say, the right side, as we look at it here, of the fort feature, there's this dark impression in the ground, and it turns out that's a glassy tube coming out of the fort, which we can see here in this greatly magnified view of just that portion, the back wall of the fort and that dark object there. We see that it's actually a glassy tube coming out of the fort, which disappears below the surface a short distance out. Well, with some of the new infrared and ground-penetrating radar techniques, we can now trace that underground as long as it doesn't go too deep. And that produced some interesting results. This is an infrared, which means it's a heat view of the same images. So this is what the face over here looks like in infrared, where we're sensing only the heat, not the light. And this is the fort. And we can see in infrared that the tube traces its way right down to the next mesa. So it goes from one to the other. And in better views than we can see here, there's another branch that goes off and connects with this one. So that's art added by me, but just to show you what it is we're seeing there. So the point of this is that in this and many other cases, the tubes are not random, but they connect interesting surface features. Here's another example. There's a crevice, I would say, that stretches for hundreds of kilometers across the surface from way above what we can see here to far below and to the left of what we see here. And here is a high-resolution view of a part of that crevice seen over here, and we see that at that particular junction of where the crevice comes down and goes off to the left, and where a branch of it goes off to the crater and then seems to go around the crater. Just at that junction, we see glassy tubes. And wouldn't that be interesting if that were whatever it is, to go in and then wrap around the rim of the crater is certainly interesting behavior. Here's a case of a nest of glassy tubes. One of the main points of this is that here we have an example of one tube with horizontal stripes crossing over another with vertical stripes, and we can see the vertical ones plainly through the horizontal ones, indicating, of course, that they do cross one another, but they're translucent. The light does pass through them. Here's an interesting case of a tube where a boulder has come in and smashed it. And what happens when the tube breaks? Well, we see that the white bands are very pointed and spindly, possibly giving the impression of sharp and needle-like. And this is lying flat on the ground, and there are exactly 2 of these for every one of these, because since it's lying flat on the ground, you get the underside as well as the top side that's visible to the eye. So when you break a tube and flatten it on the ground, that's what it looks like. And the same thing has happened down here. This is a flattened portion of the tube from this rock, but this is an intact portion. And there you see the transition between the two. We see that in many cases, the tubes have right-angle junctions and network, and here's a case where there's some sort of a terminus where many tubes from different directions come together. We don't know what the glassy tubes are, but we certainly would like to know more. This is an artist concept. Anything with coloration added to these images from Mars Global Surveyor has to be an artist concept. But that's what the imagination might lead us to if we just looked at all the evidence and said, what could this be? Because we can rule out the major geological theories, lava tubes and sand dunes and so on, that have been proposed. This is the first of a set of interesting type of objects that have shapes on Mars. And of course, there are lots of shapes that can occur in clouds and in nature, but these particular shapes are all taken from one particular narrow region on Mars called Sidonia. And Sidonia is where also the famous face on Mars is located, and it seems to have a clustering of these shapes. And it draws our attention for several reasons. One is that it's a nest of shapes that look in many ways familiar. So they're clustered in one area, and secondly, they have relationships to one another, so that the ones that you would associate with aquatic features, such as this one, are in one region of Sidonia, and things that fly are in another region, and things that are mammals are in another region, and so on, such as this. So what's the point there? Well, here's one of those high-resolution strip images taken by a spacecraft. And we were starting to notice that things are organized, and that many of the aquatic-like shapes, such as the one I showed here that looks sort of like a seahorse, and this one that sort of looks like a fish or possibly a swordfish, and this looks like a hermit crab shell. One's imagination can run wild, but this is a darker area and gets darker as you go down, and things that are also aquatic in character are adjacent to it on both sides.